Retrobit. Thanks for tuning into the Rexer Show. Today we're going to take a look at the Sega Genesis RetroFlag USB controller. Now this controller is compatible with the Switch, Windows, the Raspberry Pi, and even your Mac OS. So if you're looking for a Sega Genesis type controller with USB input, there's a couple options out there for you. One of them is this RetroFlag controller, Sega Genesis 8-button, and the other is a Retrobit, which I'll get into shortly. This RetroFlag, you see, you can get it on Amazon for $14.99. It's an 8-button controller. So if you're looking at the Retrobit, remember that they have a 6-button and an 8-button, and we'll talk about that. Now the reason most people are going to be looking for a controller like this, a 6-button or 8-button Sega controller, is because they're going to be procuring the Sega Genesis Mini. And if you buy the US version, you're getting a 3-button controller with your Sega Mini. So you may want to upgrade and buy new controllers. Now, again, I'm not positive, nobody is yet, that either the Retrobit or the RetroFlag will work with the Genesis Mini, but for right now, we're going to assume it will because I don't see why it wouldn't. Now, when you go to the Retrobit website, you're going to notice that they have a 8-button and a 6-button Sega controller along with a Saturn type controller. So do your shopping around here, do your research. I will tell you that I bought the 8-button Sega controller, not this 6-button that you see right there. This is the 6-button right here. It's $14.99, and you'll notice obviously there isn't an L1 or an R1. I did buy the 8-button one, and I had to return it because the USB kept connecting and disconnecting on my Windows. So I'd get that chime and then an unchime, and it just wouldn't stay connected if I moved the cord slightly. Now I don't know if that was just my 8-button Retrobit controller, but I tried to write them and I didn't get a response, and returning something through Amazon's a little difficult. So I had to return it. Now this is the one that I had to return because again the USB kept disconnecting, connecting, recognizing, unrecognizing. You'll notice the specs on the Retrobit controllers. It is the official Sega licensed controller. It is compatible with PC, Mac, Steam, and Super Retrocade. It is not compatible at this time with the Switch, so keep that in mind, whereas the RetroFlag is compatible with the Switch. It has D input, X input, toggle option, etc. Similar to the RetroFlag, which let's take a look at this RetroFlag controller and go over the options it has, as well as the feel, and compare it to a couple other controllers that I do have right now, which is Sega Original as well as a Hyperkin Sega. Now if you're going to buy one, the easiest way is obviously to go to Amazon. Amazon owns the world, so just buy it from there, or you can go to their website retroflag.com and look at all their products. They have some nifty products, including I have a SNES RetroFlag controller, which I really like. Works really well, but they got all the other things like a RetroFlag GPI case, which is a Game Boy case for your Pi Nano, and some other nifty gadgets as well. Alright, so let's unbox this thing and take a look. Okay, so what we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at 3 controllers and try and compare them a little bit, but let's just start with the unboxing of the RetroFlag. Now, here's the box it came in. There's some instructions on the back that go over many of the tech specs, and I'm going to touch on those briefly. When I got this, I already pulled it out of the case. I opened it up because I was a little nervous when I got it. The controller and the cord really fit into the box tight, and it was kind of bulging out, and then I didn't see a seal on the top of the box, so I was a little concerned about the newness of this remote. I almost thought I was getting a refurbished one or something. I took it out, and it came in this bag, and this bag wasn't even necessarily sealed either. But when I got it out, it looked brand new. It didn't look like there was anything wrong with it, so there was no issue there. But I was a little concerned initially when I took it out because there was no seal, and it didn't fit in the box that well. If you get one and it looks like that, I wouldn't be concerned, and I'd also like to know if yours had a seal on it or not. But let's take a look at the specs here. So the one important thing here, again, is that this has compatibility with the Switch. When we talked about the Retrobit, they did not have one compatible with the Switch, but apparently they're making a new model, or may have already, that is compatible with the Switch. Obviously with Windows, the Raspberry Pi, And I'll say this again, not 100. I will not say I'm 100% sure that this will work with the Mega Genesis Mini, but you have to think that it will because it works with all these others. But until somebody has the Mini, until they plug it in, until somebody tests it and says for sure, you can't be certain on anything, either the Retrobit or the RetroFlag for that matter. The cord, which is an important part, is 6 feet long approximately. The Retrobit is 10 feet long, and I have a Hyperkin here that I'll go over as well. This is 7 foot long cord for the Hyperkin, so keep that in mind. The RetroFlag has X input as well as D input. You hold X and plug in, that's the default actually X input. The D input, you hold Y and plug it in. So you'd hold Y and plug it into your PC or whatever system you're using it on. The one interesting thing here is it has a button swap feature. You're swapping basically your R1s and L1s, so to speak, with the two buttons on the face. Now, why that would be a concern, I'm not necessarily sure. If you're using RetroArch or something that will recognize 8 inputs, you can switch the inputs through the controls, but maybe it will have some functionality for you on whatever purpose you're using it that you'll need to do that. It also has a turbo setting where you hold L and select, and the A, B, X, and Y will turn on and off to this function. It only applies to those 4 buttons for the turbo. Now let's get into some of the aesthetics here. We already talked about the length of the cord. I'm going to show you these 3 remotes here. Now, first you have the original Sega. This is the original Sega 6 button. Okay. This is a Hyperkin, which I'm going to go over a little bit. And this is the RetroFlag. The RetroFlag is smaller. You're going to feel it when you're playing with it, that this RetroFlag is smaller. And it might take you a little bit of time to get used to it if you're used to playing with a regular Sega controller. Be wary of that. It didn't take me too long to get used to it, but I could tell the difference right away. The other thing with this is, as compared to a Hyperkin, you get a select button on the face. Okay, and again, you don't have the mode button up here. You have the L1 R1, whereas with the Hyperkin, you have a mode button similar to the original Sega. Now the Retrobit has a start button and a circular kind of mode button right here when you have the 8 button one as well. And then, obviously 2 buttons up here. And remember, the Retrobit versions have both a 6 button version and an 8 button version for the Retrobit. Now let's go into the button feel and pressing the buttons as well as the D-pad. For the RetroFlag, the D-pad movement is fairly soft, makes a little bit of sound. So maybe you can hear that. Not much. It feels really good. It's really soft and it moves around. And let's take a look at the buttons. They're a little bit loud, but not bad at all. And I can tell you that both the D-pad and the buttons are very similar with the Retrobit versus the RetroFlag, because I did have the Retrobit for a short period of time, as I explained. So I can tell you that those 2 joysticks they feel very similar in feel when you're pressing the buttons and the D-pad. The Hyperkin, this thing is bulky and clunky, but it's not too bad as a joystick from reaction time and basic feel to the original. So if we press down on the D-pad or around, you can hear it's a lot louder. The buttons, much louder, not as soft. But some people might like that hard push kind of. It springs a little better than the Retrobit. So it springs a little better, but it's harder to press. And I remember, when I was using this before I got the RetroFlag, that I was pushing pretty hard on this Hyperkin in the thumb, and my thumb actually hurt a little bit from using it too much because I felt like I had to press harder. subconsciously you kind of feel like you need to press harder, even though there's not that much difference. You can definitely hear and feel the difference of the D-pad. Now, this is the original Sega, and you know, this feels now like the RetroFlag because it's much more broken in. So you can barely hear it, really, not that much. And then the buttons, pretty soft now. They're broken in. They're really soft now. This controller's, you know, old. It's 25 years old or whatever. So it's not really a good comparison at this point in the joystick. Okay, so there you have it. I compared a few joysticks. We do have this Sega original to compare it against. I use mine for my PC. I haven't really used it on the Raspberry Pi or anything else at this point. But I'm very happy with this RetroFlag. Again, I do own the Super Nintendo RetroFlag, and I'm extremely happy with this one as well. They just work really well, and I'm not going to go over, you know, gameplay and show you gameplay and reaction time. They're all going to be fairly similar from that standpoint when you talk about a USB type plug-in as opposed to maybe a Bluetooth. So I wouldn't worry about lag or input lag or anything like that. So my conclusion with this, you know, again, playing with both the Retrobit and the RetroFlag, if it was me, I really would just go with the RetroFlag and save the $5 with the, with the 8-button model here. It's so similar to the Retrobit. I don't think you're going to see a difference. And it's unfortunate that I had that problem with the USB port, you know, and my PC continually not recognizing it and chiming recognized, then unrecognized, then recognized. Or I probably would have never bought this RetroFlag if that didn't happen. I probably would have stuck with that remote as well. Hey, I hope this video helped you decide what controller to get for your Sega Mini if you do end up getting one. You know, leave some comments and help some other people if you have some more information or some tips that you'd like to share. And thanks for watching The Rexer Show.